This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Hi there, my name is Jonah Jong for BCIT's The Crow, and welcome back to For the Record. As the new school year has begun, teachers and students are getting back to their classrooms. If you are going back to school, then would you stay in class or take classes online as you did during the pandemic? It turns out you can do both if you go to schools in Surrey. Earlier this month, the Surrey School Board announced that schools in BC will have hybrid learning courses for grade 10 to 12 students. The board says the hybrid classes will have students participate online and in person, training students to get used to the modern technology using artificial intelligence and to have critical and creative thinking. To get more information on this new change in Surrey classrooms, I spoke with the superintendent of the board, Perry Smith, to know more about the goal of this program and how AI will be used.
So we have 21 secondary schools in our district, and each school is running between 1 to 3 sections of courses in hybrid learning. So a section would be in a semester a class that might be an English class or a social studies class, a math class, and they might run a section in hybrid that would have up to 25 to 30 students in it. And they would be participating in class, in person, partial schedule, and a part of their schedule they would be attending in a hybrid environment where they might be in the school or they might be off campus learning at their own pace or online with their teacher.
Thank you. So you mentioned different subjects adopting the hybrid learning. So one thing that I researched was about the usage of AI. So in terms of modern skill development for post-secondary education and for the working world, which was mentioned in the website, how can school teachers teach students to use AI in terms of different subjects such as science, English, or anything?
Yeah, generative artificial intelligence is definitely a resource that we want students to be able to engage in and learn how to use ethically to solve problems, to support their critical thinking and their creative thinking, both in class and when they're not in class, working independently on learning tasks. So our district is continuing to work with different AI platforms to support teachers and provide them with opportunities to use different AI platforms to support learning in class. Our building professional capacity department and our priority practices department are investigating different AI platforms that can support teachers in the planning of classwork, as well as resources using AI to help students learn with different generative AI platforms. So we are closely working with our teachers to learn how to use AI in the classroom, to teach students how to use AI ethically, to help them with their classwork, so that we're continuing to build students that are critically and creatively thinking about problems, learning how to communicate, and using 21st century learning resources like generative AI.
Thank you. So as technology evolves, as much as it is important to utilize AI in terms of its pros, there can also be cons regarding plagiarism or over reliance on AI, because answers the AI gives you can be productive, but at the same time they can be misinformative, or it can have like a unified ideology that might be different from what the student is expecting. So how will that be addressed in secondary institutes for children who are still growing, students who are
Yeah,
still growing?
great question. And this really speaks to the power of having a teacher guide and nurture learning in a classroom. As it is the teacher that is helping students learn how to access content knowledge, whether it be through artificial intelligence, whether it be from a web browser, other digital resources, or from print material. Working with students to learn how to critically think about the content that they are reading and learning from. As that's one of the core competencies that our curriculum in British Columbia really focuses on, is the ability to access content, to critically think about the accuracy of that content, to understand perspectives of people from multiple backgrounds, languages, ways of knowing and understanding, so that we can communicate what we've learned in a way that's respectful, that's accurate, and thinks about the many perspectives of different people in the school and in our community. So it's absolutely our work as educators to help students learn how to navigate digital resources that continue to evolve, so that students can learn how to use those in an ethical and positive way.
Thank you. So you mentioned critically using and evaluating and understanding the content that they consume under the guidance of a teacher.
Mhm.
And one thing that I want to mention is that um, it can be interactive, but at the same time, with the teacher being there, there can be flexibility. But students can also become a little bit lazy due to that flexibility. So, how can the teacher keep the students engaged while making it interactive and
Mm.
flexible?
For sure. And these are some of the questions that all teachers contemplate, all educators contemplate, regardless of whether we're discussing uh, digital resources, the internet, generative AI, is how do we engage students in learning that is meaningful and relevant, and supports student individual learning goals. And that's the work that we do with teachers through professional learning, through our priority practices department, and other structures to allow teachers to work together in communities of practice to discuss how do we create learning activities for students that are engaging, relevant to their own personal experiences, and allow us as educators to accurately understand what students know and can do. So that might mean that we create assessments where students are doing work in analog fashion, where they might be writing on paper, and providing us with samples of work that are their own work. We might be assessing students' skills and knowledge through an interview format, where we have conversations to assess what students know and can do. So there are multiple ways that teachers can access evidence of student learning that allows students to show us what they can do and what they know, without using uh, um, digital resources like artificial intelligence that might make it more challenging to know whether it is uh, um, uh, the student's work.
Thank you. So you mentioned catering certain things for students without using digital resources, but in terms of AI, how can a digital resource called AI be used to help students who might be underperforming or uh, having some facing literacy issues or other issues in the classroom?
Hmm. Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I think it's what we continue to work with our district staff as they work with um, digital resource providers to look at different platforms that are developed to support student learning, and they might be platforms that support students in accessing content information. They might be platforms that support students in accessing resources through audiobooks or other means. And we work with our district partners and vendors in the community to help find resources that support both teachers and students. Then we have the opportunity to try those out in different classrooms with sponsor teachers, and then um, those platforms that we believe are positive learning resources, we can share with other schools and other students to utilize in their learning. So there is a process that the district utilizes to assess the appropriateness of different resources, so that we can share those with teachers and they can share those with their students.
Thank you. So you mentioned testing out different platforms, AI platforms. So
Mhm.
one last question is, what are the platforms that are currently being tested in the educational field, and how are
Mhm.
parents and students reacting to it?
Yeah, so I would suggest that there are a number of different platforms that are being tested right now with different teachers in our schools that we know are leaders in the use of digital resources and educational technology. Um, as they are being tested and getting feedback from those teachers, then we would ascertain whether they're platforms that we want to share amongst our learning community, or look for others that might be more successful. Um, what I think we continue to do is communicate with our families about the use of AI and uh, how students can use AI in a positive way, and also talk to our students and our families about, how are we navigating the use of AI, and what are some of the things that we need to consider to ensure that students um, are still engaging in learning that stretches their thinking, stretches their critical problem solving and their creativity.
Thank you. So I think that'll be all for my questions. Is there any last message that you would like to say to the viewers in terms of hybrid learning and AI?
I would say that I'm really excited about the opportunity for students in our schools to engage in a flexible learning structure that allows them to uh, uh, increase their skill in managing their time, to working digitally with their peers, and also working with their teachers in a digital environment that supports their learning. So I'm excited to continue to see the development of hybrid learning.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you being on this interview. And it was very great to hear your thoughts about um, students' education and a new technology being adopted for the development of the students. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.
My name is Jonah Jung for BCIT's The Crow, and this has been For the Record. Thank you.
As inflation climbs, wages lag behind, and grocery prices surge, food insecurity is reaching critical levels across Canada. To understand the impact on frontline services, I spoke with Nick Johnson, Manager of Member Services at Food Banks BC, about whether demand has risen in recent years. He says the trend is not only growing, it's showing no signs of slowing down.
There's definitely a curve to this all. I would say it's an upward curve. So 3 years ago, if we're talking about 3 years ago to now, the percentage increase is quite significant. I'd have to quickly pull up some percentages to get very specific, but there was definitely a major upward curve in usage and requests for service from about 3 years ago till this last year. There still is an upward trajectory. However, the curve is starting to slow down. Now, the why, that one's a little bit trickier to understand because when we look at the economic situation, obviously price of living continues to go up. So you would expect that maybe the curve would continue in that steep incline. However, according to our numbers, and it's kind of an asterisk on that, like we're a membership of 111 members. So we really only have the data that our members provide to us. But there's so much more food security work that's happening out there in the province and all the communities that make up BC. And so anyways, back to the point of 3 years ago till about this last year, it was about a 25% increase year over year for those 2 years. I think we're looking at about an 8 to 10, if I'm not mistaken, for last year to this year, given the data that we have from our members. So it is starting to slow down, but it is still an increase.
Got it. And then I guess my second question that you kind of answered already, which can be, so many different things, was what are some of the main factors contributing to the food insecurity? But you kind of, touched on that, how there could be so many things. I've got, housing costs, stagnant wages, inflation. So your answer would kind of be just there's a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, it's a spider's web of, it's very complex. Some of the data tells us that at least provincially speaking, the highest percentage of food bank users are those who are working, either full-time or part-time, holding down some kind of job. So I think that, that speaks to, yes, folks are doing what they can. This might be a wage thing. I know a lot of these folks might be working for minimum wage or just above minimum wage, probably not a livable wage. But, so they're still working, but they still can't, make ends meet, afford the cost of living. So it is a cost of living situation. I think forever it's been a disability and income assistance rate issue as well, never really keeping up with what it costs. It's a housing piece, provincial government and other entities promise affordable housing, but it's never really able to keep up with the demand and those who need it. And so it's a myriad of things, but ultimately it is a financial piece. If folks had the finances to afford the home that they live in, to pay for the groceries that they need from the grocery store, their gas, their insurance, whatever it might be, if they were able to afford basic living costs, they would not be showing up to food banks. We would not need to exist. So,
Right. There's definitely a multitude of things, and also adding to that list, grocery stores gouging and all that kind of stuff as well is a huge part of it. And then, so given on the statistics and your data that you might have provincially, can you comment on who are the people most affected by food insecurity, and has that demographic in your statistics changed over time?
Yeah, I would say that, coming back to the statistic on working families or working households, where that's the primary source of income for their house, that has increased over time. I would have to go back into the historical data, which I don't have in front of me, but I do know that has been an increasing number over the years from the data that we have. Whereas I hate to, go on the record, and because I would like to be as specific as possible, but even prior to 5 years ago, I'm quite confident that prior to 5 years ago, those who are on long-term disability would have made up the kind of the largest percentage of those visiting food banks. Or on that fixed income, employment is a difficult thing to hold steady because of what the disability that they're working through, whatever that might be. However, working families have eclipsed that. So it is a myriad. I think, if I'm not mistaken, those on disability is like 19%. Working families is somewhere between 23 to 25%. Then there's those who are on income assistance and those who are on EI, and there's a kind of a number of ways that those demographics kind of make up the 100%. So it is a myriad. It's not like one is 60%. There is certainly a balance to the visitors that are coming to food banks across the province. So when it comes to who are the most vulnerable, I think it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It's really just this one group. It is unhoused. It is those who are, unable to make ends meet. It's, it's a myriad. It's hard to actually say like it is specifically. These are the most vulnerable. If I were to give an answer to that, though, just from the gut, it is those who are working with less flexible income to go by to cover costs day to day, week to week.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that definitely makes sense, and that you're probably right. And then so a follow-up question is what are the biggest challenges that the food bank faces in trying to meet this growing demand? Food supply shortages, funding, space, staffing. What would you say?
Yeah. There's a real divide between urban and rural food banks. That's pretty, at least what I see when I chat with members. I'm the manager of member services and liaise with 111 members that make up our membership and know them decently well. If you're in a very large city like Vancouver, typically you've got a larger donor base to work with. Those who can afford to live in Vancouver often have maybe a little bit deeper pockets, can give to the cause. Not always the case. There's vulnerable folks and those who maybe don't have those means in every community across the province. But if you're living in an urban center, typically there is more access to funding and donor bases, those who are living in your community, versus, someone like in Grand Forks, small town BC, smaller population, still a high level of food insecurity, lots of visits to their food bank as well. Infrastructure, so they've got the kind of a smaller food bank to work with, which means that they can't necessarily buy in bulk, or at least to the bulk levels that would see huge amounts of, cost savings because, it'd be great to buy a pallet of pasta. I would get a great deal on that, but I don't have space to hold a pallet of pasta and a pallet of beans and a pallet of all these things. So space is an issue, especially for a lot of rural, smaller food banks. And so what they're hoping for is more of a regular cadence that shipments can be made in smaller quantities, but there are very few suppliers out there who can do that in a timely and
Where does most of your food come from? And are those sources becoming more or less reliable? I know you were just talking about shipping and in bulk, so that was my next question.
Yeah, there are, in 2021, 2022, especially after the atmospheric rivers happened, highways being washed out, there's all sorts of stuff going around at that time. And I would say that at that point, there was a huge disruption in the logistics supply chain. However, I feel like most of that we are overcoming. So when it comes to food purchasing, there are some food banks that will place orders through their local grocery store. So a lot of, obviously, every food bank, I don't know of a single food bank that isn't purchasing food. And when I say that, let me backtrack that a lot of food banks do really great from donations, like, there's a food drive, or, groups come together and donate a bunch of food. But food recovery has been, especially since 2018, been a huge staple for food banks and prior. But in 2018, that's kind of when the floodgates opened and a lot of corporate partners like Pattison Group, a lot of their chains and Loblaws, et cetera, really kind of got over what had been a liability concern for some time. What if they see the Best Western branded meat and someone gets sick? Although there is what's called the Donor Encouragement Act, which, releases them of the liability as long as there's no ill intent in that transfer of food over to a food bank or a charitable organization like a food bank. 2017, 2018 is when things really opened up, and corporations, partly it was a corporate social responsibility thing and other reasons as well. But food banks started to see a lot more food flowing through, stuff that wouldn't sell, but was still really good for human consumption. Still had some dates on it, or it was closer to, best before date, but still was great to be given out and was safe to be given out. And so a lot of food banks started to rely on that. I will say that as time has gone on since that point in time, grocery stores are getting a bit better with the data that they have, which affects their purchasing, which affects, maybe not having as much to give away. A lot of corporations are, just trying to think, I think this would be an example, and most have kind of their own app, but Loblaws, if I'm not mistaken, has one called Flash Foods, where instead of it just kind of, where historically would have just gone out in food recovery, gone out to a food bank or a food charity, now it's kind of being marked down at 50%, and they're trying to recoup as much cost as they can before it either goes to the landfill or goes to a charitable organization. So that, grocery stores are getting a bit better in the way that they are ordering and purchasing, which on one hand is great, maybe reducing food waste, and food security is a thing where maybe the person visiting the food bank is asking for that 50% off meat. So not to poo-poo the system, but it is affecting food banks, I think, in a pretty big way.
Right.
And then obviously the inflation that, the province is feeling we have heard from food banks that they're not only is their financial donations are decreasing, but so are their the physical food. So it is the food recovery. It is, the folks who maybe would do a food drive prior, but maybe not anymore.
That was my guest, Nick Johnson, the Manager of Member Services for Food Banks BC, and I'm Isabella Vertone for BCIT's The Crow.